My name is Ellen Harrell, and I am the Director of Marketing and Communications for the National Grazing Lands Coalition. We have Paul Luna with us today to speak about grazing management and soil health. He is a staff member and ranch manager for the Noble Research Institute, and we are really excited to have Paul on with us today. Before we get started, these Graze on Over calls, if this is your first time, these first started as a way for our producers to be able to connect with one another, do state coalition announcements, and anything else. And so if you have any events coming up or networking opportunities or anything else you would like to share with the group, please feel free to put those in the chat, as well as we'll do some announcements at the end. But like I said earlier, feel free. I think Paul will be okay if you have a specific question on the slide he's on to just chime in, unmute yourself. You can ask questions or put it in the chat, and I'll kind of be monitoring that to go through, and I'll just read questions out loud as they come up. But with that, I will go ahead and let Paul kick it off.
My name is Paul Luna, and I was born and raised in Sulphur, Oklahoma on a ranch. And after 28 years of law enforcement, I retired, and I kind of got lucky and got hired on at Noble. Uh-oh, it's not going. There it goes. So Noble has 7 different properties at about 13,500 acres, and I am the manager of the headquarters and Doopy properties, and another place we call 3rd Street, which we haven't got any animals over there yet, but we're trying to. So Noble has got into being regenerative. I think. So what is regenerative? It's land stewardship for improved soil health and grazing animal production with lasting producer profitability. It's all about our soils being healthy and a stronger bottom line. So the 6 principles we follow here at Noble is knowing your context, covering the soil, minimize soil disturbance, maintain continuous living plants, increase diversity, and integrating animals. Knowing your context is pretty much knowing your individual situation, your water resources, your climate and rainfall patterns, the landscape terrain, your grazable acres. And grazable acres is kind of a big one for me, because when I first seen how much I can graze on my own land, it was a lot different from the size of the property was. So it's kind of eye-opening. And the soil types and forage types, management and history and practices, and the people's skills, knowledge, and willingness to learn. Willingness to learn is another big one for me, because you have to have a different mindset. You have to be willing to learn and be and want to be regenerative. Covering the soil. Covering the soil is keeping the ground covered with actively grown plants and plant residue. We manage plants and plant residue through grazing management and stocking rates. It's pretty hard to keep the soil covered if you're overstocked and overgrazed. And this is kind of a cool picture. The one on top with the water. The guy on the picture on the left, the guy's a regenerative, and the picture on the right is just a plowed field. And then to minimize soil disturbance. And that is through chemical, mechanical, and biological. We minimize our spraying, which at Noble I don't spray anymore, and fertilizing. I don't use fertilizers. And mechanical, which is plowing, which really tears up your soil. So we don't do any plowing. And biological is pretty much overgrazing. So we try not to overgraze. maintaining living roots year round. And I always want to have living roots, whether it's warm season or cool season. And we can fill in gas by just overseeding our annual crops. So increasing diversity, and that's our plants, grazing livestock, wildlife, birds, insects, earthworms, microorganisms. And the way I do this, I graze multiple species of animals on diverse mixes of forages, and because each class of species of animals kind of prefer different things. So we're also trying to increase the four functional groups: the grasses, legumes, forbs, woody plants. And I had seen an increase of our native legumes this year. So the water cycles, these are the four ecosystem processes that we are trying to increase with our grazing management. So the energy flow, which starts with the sun and how the plants capture the sun's energy through the leaves, which I call solar panels. And so to make sure the functions work, one needs to give adequate time for the plants to recover from grazing. The water cycle is basically having good ground cover, both actively growing plants and plant litter. And that's the key to this process. The plant cover acts as a shield so the soil isn't washed away. The nutrient cycle is about the transfer of nutrients between living organisms and non-living organisms. The bacteria, fungi, and other microscopic life in the soil play important roles in cycling nutrients from the air and the water and making nutrients accessible to the plants. Community dynamics, that's the changes to the community composition over time as the environment changes. So do plants, the microbiology, and animals that occupy the area. So, okay, so what I do is these are the grazing methods that I've used and that we continue to use. The first one is the continuous grazing, which is what I grew up doing. And I really don't use this anymore because this allows for the livestock to keep going back to their favorite food source, which doesn't allow the plant to recover. And it's kind of like me at a buffet. I keep going back for the fried fish, and the cows will keep going back for their favorite food source. Rotational grazing, it's a little better system because it allows plants to be able to rest and recover. And rest and recovery are different. Rest is simply just a downtime for the plant from grazing, and recovery is a time for the plant to grow and to heal. That is if the livestock is not rotated back in too quickly. High stock density this is the method I typically use now, especially at Noble. I give the livestock what they need for like a 24-hour period. And I usually use the leave half, take half method. But sometimes I want to take more, sometimes I take less. It's all about observation and kind of what you're wanting for that grazing event. And this method allows for more uniform grazing and uniform distribution of manure and urine. And the ultra high stock density, now that's the system that I use a lot, or I don't use it a whole lot, but when I use this method, I move the livestock multiple times a day and usually longer rest and recovery periods. In the bale grazing, this method we use if we're in a certain location and we're trying to manipulate a landscape for a desired outcome. And I use this if I have a poorer piece of ground, I'll throw it over on that piece of ground just to increase the soil fertility. Or I have placed a bale over some greenbriers and have the cattle stomp them out. So let me see. There we go. So how do I determine how I'm going to apply the practices of my way I'm grazing? So what we do, the stock density is pretty much the number of head times the average weight divided by number of acres, which if you have 50 head of cattle, they are 50 head of animals and they're 1,000 pounds a piece, that's 50,000 pounds. And you divide that, like if you're putting them on a half acre, or if you want, this is an ultra high stock density. And if you're wanting ultra high stock density, we'll put them on a half acre, which is 100,000 pounds per acre. And the way we measure the heights of grasses, we use a grazing stick, or you can use a yardstick. But what I do is I run my fingers down that stick till I get to the canopy of the grasses, and then I'll look at the height of the grasses. And if it's like 12 inches, I'll use that. And the 200 pounds of dry matter is kind of a standard. But the way I look at the dry matter is and measure it is we'll take that stick and run it right along the ground under the grasses and just get as close to the ground as you can. And like if I can see 80% of the stick, then I'm saying there's like 200 pounds. If you see 90% of the stick, then it's like 300 pounds. And the 70%, if I see 70%, we use 100 pounds. And most time, if it's under 70%, we don't graze it. And so I determine how much an animal needs for that day. So what I do is like you got 50 head times 1,000, which is 50,000. And we use like, I normally use 3% of their body weight is how much I usually give them, which is 1,500 pounds a day. And so if I'm wanting to just do the take half, leave half method, I do the 3,000 pounds of forage. And I divide that by the 2,400 pounds of dry matter as an example above. And so I need to give them like 1.25 acres a day. So this is a picture of a high stock density graze, which I call it a termination graze on the left, because we're terminating a cover crop. And on the right is a high stock density graze, but we did the take half, leave half method. And so this is a picture where we graze some, that is giant ragweed, and we ran some cattle in there and they grazed it. The picture on the right is just showing what happened after they grazed it. And this is a bale graze. The one on the right is after we put the bales on, and the one on the left is right before we put it on there, which is kind of a cool picture. And this is one I did at my house. This is a bale graze. That background is greenbriers. So we started integrating livestock at Noble. And I was kind of one of those guys that said I wouldn't ever run sheep or goats. And now they're some of my favorite. I love to watch them. But the first time I introduced some sheep to some heifers, I really didn't know what I was doing. And luckily we had a 5-acre trap that is a field fence all the way around it. So what I did was I put the heifers in first, and then I followed them up with the sheep. And when I threw the sheep in there, they started chasing my heifers. And it was hot that day, and I thought, oh man, they're going to kill my heifers. It was quite an experience. And I learned from it in this picture with the bulls, and these are goats. And now I set them beside each other for a few hours and kind of get them used to each other. But integrating livestock, I mean, it's a great way to, you know, create diversity. You know, your sheep and goats, they utilize a larger amounts of available forages in your pasture, and they add to the distribution of the manure and the urine, but they also add a different source of income. So here is when I turn the goats in with the bulls. Forgive my video skills. I'm not a very good videographer. At first, I thought those bulls were going to run the goats through the fences, but they didn't. So this is a picture of just some of our sheep and goats that are on our different properties, the different ranches. This was a picture of our cows in the cover crop, our summer covers. This is a video of us. I also have some forage finished lambs here on headquarters. This is kind of a video of us moving those. And what it is, we just raised the fences on the other side of the paddock. You can see this fence. So, and we move these multiple times a day. We keep them up and keep them grazing, help them gain that weight. These little ruminants are fun to mess with, fun to take care of, which I never thought I would like it because, you know, I'm a cowboy. When they finally see they can get under it, there they go. Those ones jumping is just where the wire used to be.
That's great.
Here's an example. This is an example of a 140,000 pound stock density with the bulls and the goats. And I was moving them to the next move. They were in this paddock for about 3.5, 4 hours before I moved them. And I really like this type of grazing method. I mean, you can get close to your animals and check their health, and they get used to you. You see, these bulls are pretty lazy. And that's a 1-strand polywire fence that's about knee high. It's keeping the bulls and the goats in. These goats are lazy too. But you can get a lot more manure and urine distribution on these smaller paddocks like this. This was a half acre. But once they get used to that hot wire, and they're easily trained to it. And even though right now that wire's not hot, but they still go around it and have a lot of respect for it. So Oh. Yeah, they were kind of full that day and got a lot what they wanted to eat and just kind of laid down. Like they're hard to move sometimes when they do that if they're not hungry. You can see how we laid the grass down there and compared to the other side of the paddock. This is another video of me moving is the 271 head of heifers on horseback. And what I think cool about it, all my life I have, well, that's me calling them. All my life I have always drove them. And now you can train them to just come to you. You can leave.
Paul, we have a question in the chat.
Uh-huh.
Byron asks, what do you do for predator control and for water for goats and sheep?
Well, I'm pretty much here in town, so I don't have a lot of predators. What we did use is the bulls and cows over at a place we call Research Park, and so they pretty well kept most of the predators away that we would have, which is mainly would be dogs. And so I don't have to worry about that. And my water is pretty much city water, and we have uh, spigots and mirror founts everywhere. So I don't have a whole lot of trouble with getting water.
We have another question. Do you raise your own bulls or do you purchase locally?
On my place, I purchase locally, but Noble, they have a guy that, or our general ranch manager, he purchases them from different places. So through all these grazing methods, we don't ever want to become stagnant or do the same thing continuously. We want to kind of shake things up and call disruption. So here's a few different disruption methods. Like number one, don't use the same stocking rate in the same paddocks. Don't graze the livestock in the same patterns at the same time. Have different rest periods in the paddocks. Modify your grazing heights. And then if you have a multi-species, try graze them in different orders. Like they call it the leader follower. Like if you're grazing your cows first and throwing your goats or sheep in behind them, just reverse it. Or do like I do and combine them a lot. So this is a picture of me and my dad. And I have a picture of one of my cows. I thought it was a cool picture, a double rainbow. But why I chose regenerative ranching? Pretty much in a nutshell, I was tired of fighting Mother Nature. I was spraying the same weeds every year and using fertilizer. And I mean, the last time I sprayed, I had lost the hose on the bottom of my sprayer, and I was trying to keep all the spray I could keep because it cost so much. So I was trying to keep as much of my hard-earned money as I could. So I climbed under there and I pretty much took a bath in that spray, and it made me sick. And I was, pretty much tired of sinking money into my own place. And, and also I wanted to leave it to the next generations, the future generations, in a better state than I had found it. And maybe they won't have to throw their money at it like I did. So if you really want to learn from the experts, we have some classes coming up at Noble. It's called Essentials of Regenerative Ranching. There's one October 17th at College Station, and 31st and 1st would be here at Ardmore. And then they have one November 7th, 8th at Kingsville. This is essentials of grazing. It's a grazing workshop. It's different. And we'll have one here at Noble October 24th through the 26th. And this would be including me. We have cattle up here that we would do a grazing presentation with. And then one in Miami, Oklahoma, November 14th to the 16th. This is a little more about Noble if you want to learn more. We're on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, or YouTube. Anyways, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Paul, we got several questions in the chat, and everybody please continue to add your questions there, and I'll just kind of rapid fire through if that sounds good.
Okay. If I don't have an answer, we'll try to find you an answer.
Perfect. Well,
because I'm by no means I'm an expert at this. I'm new at it and continue to learn myself.
The first question I have is from Michael. He is asking, how much rain do y'all get in a year?
About 34 inches on average.
The next question is, how many months of grazing (parentheses plant growth) do you get?
Much what?
How many months of grazing of plant growth do you get? What's your grazing season?
We pretty much graze year round. We'll stockpile, and so maybe the only time we really do any feeding any hay or anything is like or on my place and on headquarters in Deepy is during bad weather, icy or snowy, or if I'm trying to accomplish something, like I said, on with bell grazing, about the only time I feed it.
The next question asks, are there any cover crops that you recommend for sheep and goats?
No, what we do is mainly wheat. We have some vetch in there and several different things. We got turnips and stuff like that.
Would anyone else like to ask a question either in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and ask? Well, I have a question for you, Paul. I know you come from a multi-generation ranch background, and you said it seems like a lot of it was cost prohibitive to spray and all these things that really made you want to look into regenerative. But was there any battle with family or friends or other stakeholders in your ranch when you wanted to go to regenerative that you had to work through?
No, I was pretty lucky. Like my dad, he was older and he really didn't want to mess with it anymore. So he just gave it to me and the cows. And I had two sisters, and neither one of them was interested in ranching. So I was pretty much a lucky one.
And have you experienced other people through Noble or other people that you work with who have that issue?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay. We got a couple more questions in the chat. How long have you been at Noble?
5.5 years.
What do you think are the most significant challenges or limitations of regenerative ranching, and how do you propose overcoming them? Great question.
That is a good question. Okay, the first part was what now?
What do you think are the most significant challenges or limitations to regenerative ranching?
When you first get started into it, you got to buy. Money could be it. The way your ranch is set up could be it. Are you? Is there a lot of wooded areas? Are you limited on water, shade, or is there too much? I mean, that's what keeps me back at my place because I got so much timber and my water. It I have to make lanes for my cattle or to go up to get water to keep them off the other part of the property.
And then the second part of the question was, how do you propose overcoming these obstacles?
Well, what I what I have done on part of mine is we did a water well. We drilled a well and was able to come off of it, which is kind of what we did. And we've been doing some mechanical brush control, like mulching. I've done a lot of mulching here lately at my place. And we're starting to, well, Noble has done a lot of it, but at headquarters, we're fixing to start doing some mulching too.
Our next question is, who is your customer base?
Anybody that wants to get into regenerative ranching.
And
But
then
it is kind of a different mindset. I mean, you have to want to do it, but it is so much better for the land.
Mhm.
And
What about at your own place? Where do your cattle end up?
what do you mean? Do I, how do I like sell my calves and stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll take them to a local market.
perfect. Anybody have other questions for Paul? Several. Thank y'all. What are the most effective methods for inspiring and involving others in embracing these practices? I want to spread the word of regenerative ranching, but it seems hard to get others on board. They really want to spray those weeds.
Well, what's kind of cool about that, all my life I've been told that, cattle won't eat this, cattle won't eat that. And when you start doing regenerative ranching, they'll pretty much start trying stuff that's different from what they're normally eat. So that was just something eye opening to me. And still, I'm kind of amazed at some of the stuff they'll eat, like that giant ragweed. Uh, and the giant ragweed is like over 30% protein. So why would you want to kill it? And there's just so many other grasses and forbs that cattle, sheep, goats, they'll eat. We don't want to spray it. So we'll let them take it down for us.
Someone mentioned that regenerative ranching is also better for wildlife,
Uh-huh.
especially like if you're trying to manage that way. Huge benefit. And then we have, when you mulch, do you leave mulch on site or do you remove it?
We leave it on site. I mean, it'll feed the soil microbes, so they'll break it down for you.
Do you see any difference in parasite control?
With regenerative ranching, or
And probably multi-species as well.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Do I see any difference?
Do you like, I'm not sure if this is the question. Dennis, please feel free to add more. But a lot of times people will say if you multi-species graze, it sometimes breaks the parasite chain or
Oh, yes, yes, that it will. With because the sheep and the cattle get different types of parasites, so yes, it does break the chain. If you do, especially the leader follower.
have you kicked the hay habit?
Yes, except for when I want to do something with it.
Another question, do you have any concerns with poisonous plants since you're not spraying or anything?
Uh, So what I do, I have a little app on my phone. It'll tell me what the plant is, so I can Google it up and see how poisonous it is. But sometimes, yes, and a lot of the plants that cattle, sheep can eat, uh, as long as they do it in moderation, it's not poisonous or it won't kill them. And there's some plants I've learned, that uh, such as the vetch that we plant, which of course, I don't have any vetch on my place, but we planted some down here at Noble. And when I learned about the vetch, it kind of surprised me because we grazed it all the time. But once they make the seed, that it can be poisonous to cattle. So I had to work around that this year because we had planted it. Plus, I have a lot of voluntary come up, and so I had to work around it and keep the cattle off of it until it dried out.
What plant ID app do you have?
It's called Picture This, which I'm not promoting it, but
I use iNaturalist. Heard a lot of good feedback on different apps.
I try to keep the the free one, and it's always wanting me to pay, but I just click cancel.
And now you can also do reverse lookup on Google. I'm not quite sure how you do it all, but you can upload a
I
photo and
I've seen that, yeah.
Mhm. What do you do about Johnson grass? And it's a
So,
loaded question because it's from Hugh.
oh, that's amazing. So, I just make sure that when I do graze it, I keep a watch over my cattle. Like I graze some later, I mean, because we come in the drought, and I threw some cattle in there on a bunch of Johnson grass, and it kind of scares me. And everything I've read about it is that probably within 30 minutes they could be dead if you don't watch them. So I sit and watch them the whole time, or for about 30 minutes to an hour, make sure nothing. I don't see any symptoms of the poison.
Any other questions? Well, oh, one, there we go. If that is all the questions, definitely feel free to unmute or add it to the chat. But I will just, oh, here we go. Someone asks, why are you not using goats for brush control?
We do. I don't have that much of a problem up here at headquarters, but some of our other ranches, yes, they'll run goats through there. I can't remember how many like our Oswald Ranch has, but it's probably 1,500. They went through there, mulched it, and then they're using the goats to clean it up, to control it.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for your time today. I am sure that we can add your contact information as well as other general Noble contact information when we send the follow-up email from this webinar. We really enjoyed having you and your knowledge and expertise, and there's definitely a lot of great things going on at Noble. If you guys want to sign up for any of their courses, as well as their social media, their website. They have a great blog with a lot of further information as well. So we really appreciate you making time to be with us today. And we'll stay on for a few more minutes if y'all have any more questions. But with that, I will officially conclude our last Graze on Over for the year. And if you have any other announcements you'd like to add to the chat or unmute yourself, please do. Oh, we did have one more question come through. What are your plans to manage resprouts on your mulching?
That's where the goats come in. After we go through their mulch, they'll bring them back through using the goats.
Paul, quick question. This is real quick. Are you able to stock enough goats to manage those resprouts? Are you able to keep them down before they get up high enough where they become an issue, where it becomes difficult to graze? And
Well,
it is with the goats.
that's not really a question for me. I don't have that problem up here at headquarters, as you know, but Oswald, I don't know. They partnered with a guy, and there's several, or like I say, about 1,500 to 2,000 goats, I think. You know, I hadn't heard of any problems they have had down there with that.
Thank you.
Rob, I can give you a little more update on that if y'all like to know. We mulched about 400 acres and we put on those 1,400 nannies and their kids, and they haven't moved off that mulch area yet. And you go out there, you think they haven't really done any good, but the goats look really good, and the browse is staying at a in that vegetative state. It's not getting up above them, but we're going in a couple of spots of some of the less preferred species and trying just a little bit of chemical treatment on some of the less preferred, just to see what kind of response we've got. But you can't open up a whole lot more brush than what the goats can take care of. So we're just trying to figure out what that balance is, and we think we just about got that figured out.
Yeah, great, awesome. Thanks, you. That's a great point. You can get ahead of them, I guess, if you treat too much. But thanks for the update.
Yeah, it's 5,200 acre ranch, and they hadn't been on but about 400 acres all year. So,
Couple more questions coming through. Do you run sheep and goats together?
No, I have not. Just the goats and the bulls, or the sheeps. I've run sheep and heifers, but I have not run sheep and goats together. Usually because I have different sexes at different times.
Are you grazing crop residues or following harvest of no-till farming?
What I graze, I mean, the cover crops is what I graze, what I've planted with no-till, and some of the summer cover crops, we graze it. But I'm getting where I don't plant as much because I'm having a lot of volunteer and some better grasses come in, especially during the summer. So there's a lot of times I'm going down on my acres as I plant, that I've planted.
Is there a benefit of rotational grazing during winter if you have no winter cover crops? Little to no cover crops.
Yeah, what I do is I stockpile some grasses. They're dormant, but I can go back through there and graze them over the winter.
Angela said, I'm curious about what y'all do for irrigation. I've heard of K-line irrigation. We live in Texas and are in a bad drought.
Yeah, we've been in a drought a little bit, not near as bad, but I do not irrigate. I have a place at Doopy. There's like 36 acres there that we can irrigate if we needed to or wanted to, but no, I don't do any irrigation.
Are you still using prescribed fire? How are you merging that into a grazing plan?
We don't do it up here at headquarters because we're in town. But yes, the other ranches, they still do some prescribed fires.
And how do you merge that into your grazing plan?
I really haven't done any of that because I don't do prescribed fires up here. But yeah, when you're doing your grazing plan, you'd have to plan for it and work around it. Probably let it rest for at least a year.
Well, yeah, a little more information on that. Since we've been in a drought, we haven't tried to burn anything. We've been kind of cautious, but the plan is on those areas where we have the native range with the brush, we like to put that into a rotation. And as Paul said, we lay it out the last half of the year, graze it early, and then give it them, after we burn it, probably the first half of the next year to recover before we come back in. But it's all part of planning. Paul and the guys, they've got plans that are laid out every year, and then they adapt them, you know, with about every 2 to 3 weeks, because we've been in a drought, so we just constantly having to change those. But they're on top of it, monitoring the reserve herd days, monitoring the forage supply in front of them, and then accordingly, during the drought, they've had to make some stocking adjustments. But yeah, the fires are one of those things we like to get back onto, but we just, been a drought, we wanted to keep the organic matter as much as we could.
Any other questions? Okay, well, on your own place, how do you manage rotation when you have to leave for several days? Great question.
That is a great question. So what we do, we figure how much that animal's going to need, or that herd's going to need, over a specific time. So if I'm planning to be gone a week, I give them enough for like 7 days. Or, we do it quite a bit up here, even over the weekend at Noble, because we just have one guy that goes around and checks all the places, our places. So we plan for like two days of grazing, or actually 3 days of grazing, and we don't have to move them over that time period.
Would you say regenerative ranching is all about adaptability?
Oh, yes. Observation and being adaptive. That's 2 of the keys.
Well, we're 10 till our hour. Haven't gotten any more questions. I would say we'll send follow-up information for contacts if you have other questions you want to ask. You can reach out to NatGLC or Noble. But thank you everyone for coming today, and thank you so much, Paul, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.